Remember, my excellent drivers, you are responsible for the safe use of your vehicle and abiding by the state or territory rules that you are driving in, and that, of course, includes mobile phone usage.
Welcome to the Learn to Drive podcast. I'm your host, Liz Lafferty, and I'm here to guide you through the twists and turns of learning to drive with a few laughs along the way. So whether you're a newbie trying to figure out why the car keeps beeping at you, or a seasoned road warrior who still can't parallel park without causing a minor traffic jam, I've got you covered. So buckle up, check those mirrors, and let's hit the road to becoming a more confident and happier driver. Welcome to the Art of Confident Driving. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you're all having a lovely day, because I'm about to have a fantastic day. I'm about to speak to Russell White, who is the founder and CEO of Australian Road Safety Foundation. He's a road safety advocate. All of Australia knows him. If he hasn't seen him on the TV, I'd be stunned. And one thing I only just learned, I knew he was a part of our Fatality Free Friday, but I had no idea he was the founder. So I am utterly thrilled to say, please welcome Mr. Russell White.
Oh, Liz, thank you for that introduction. It's lovely to be with you and to everybody on the podcast. Great to join you today.
Thank you for taking the time, because this is Road Safety Week. Literally, we're in it. So I imagine you're a very busy man trying to get the road safety message out to people. So what would be one of the biggest things you'd like to let the public know that maybe they could be doing when they're behind the wheel, or they could do in preparation to drive?
Look, it's a diverse question, and I think it is something I've really focused my entire career on, to be honest. I think when we're looking at drivers of any level, that there is always another step to go to, another stage to go to. And I think we've got a general community perception that somehow, when you get the license with that a really good looking photograph of yourself on it, if it's say like my license, it's not a great shot at all. But what that piece of plastic essentially says is that you were reasonably competent at the time you were assessed, and that you basically knew the road rules. And I think we have a general culture and a community view that somehow when you get that piece of plastic, that the learning has stopped and that there's nothing left.
Yeah.
And it
It's a
couldn't
big problem, isn't it?
actually be further from the truth. So if there's one thing I could ask people to do, it's no matter what or how you're using the road, just think about how you might be able to do that just a little bit better today, and maybe a little bit better tomorrow. And that might mean, we've got some pretty challenging weather conditions happening here in Southeast Queensland at the moment.
Yeah.
Just making sure you're driving to those, that you're looking further ahead, that you're regulating your speed, and that you're really present with the task of driving. So no doubt we'll delve into more things as we go through this chat. But I think if there was one message straight off the bat, that would be it.
Yeah. I'm forever saying, please stay focused on the job of driving. Don't get distracted, whether it's phones, whether it's a conversation. I find I'm traveling behind a lot of cars that you can tell they're having a conversation because they're not doing the speed limit. And then, they're more interested in the conversation than the actual job of driving. And driving, as we both know, is a very complex thing to do. Even if you're experienced, things can happen. And if you're not on the ball, it's not going to end well.
No, and sadly we see examples of that every day. And in fact, even saw some as recently as last night, some pretty, let's call it suboptimal behavior from people deliberately looking for trouble, deliberately trying to push the car out of control. So we've got a few things at play with it. We've got people just through ignorance, and possibly not a great word that people like to relate to, but pretty much every single person's ignorant of something,
Yes.
and we just don't know everything. And I think sometimes when we get behind the wheel, we have this perception that because we do it every day, because nothing bad happened yesterday or the day before, that nothing bad can happen tomorrow or in the next 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And so you've got that aspect, and then you've got the people that are choosing to do the wrong thing deliberately,
Yeah.
mixing it in with us as well. And the road is such a complex environment. And as you said, it's not the task of it. If you boil it down, the actual mechanics of throttle control, braking, steering are reasonably rudimentary. The challenge that we have is that it's the environment that we're operating it in is so different, and you're never alone. The conditions are never exactly the same as they were yesterday. And I just don't think we adapt very well to potential risk in the face of something that we're doing every single day. So I think that's part of the disconnect that's out there, is just because we do it every day, we tend to have a level of complacency about it. And that's obviously something we have to try and change.
Absolutely. I find it very much with the supervising drivers or parents. So I'll turn up to, pick up the student for a lesson and they'll say, "Oh, can you, help them out with whatever it is, let's say roundabouts." And I'm sure, yeah, I'm happy to do that. Do you know the rules for the roundabouts? Do you know indicating to eggs? And they're like, no, 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 I'm okay. I'm like, but hang on a second, you're trying to be a part of the world of your child learning to drive.
Mm.
Wouldn't it be a good idea if you brushed up on your road rules? Because I think that's a big problem with a lot of Aussie drivers. As you say, once you've got the nice little piece of plastic, that's it. It's put away and you don't think about it again. But I kind of liken it to, and it's a bit crazy, but I liken it to cooking. So, when you learn to cook, you can't do much, but you get better and better. Now, if you just stop and you don't learn anymore, well, you're going to be eating pretty ordinary food. I could try and get a little bit better each time. So why can't we do the same in the car? Why can't we go, "Oh, gee, I took that corner a bit wide. So maybe if I concentrate on it next time, I'll take it at the correct distance." I guess that's one of the biggest things is brush up on your road rules and as you say, keep learning, keep trying to be better.
Yeah, Liz, I think the thing is that, we know in sport, you're only ever going to be as good as your coach. And you'll only ever get to that level of proficiency that quite often your coach has got to, or that your coach has the capability to educate at. And we see that with football, we see that with cricket, with swimming, with tennis, the list goes on and on. Your cooking one's a good example too. That if the coach or the person teaching you has limited knowledge, it's going to be very hard for you to grow past that.
Yep.
And I think it is one of the problems that we've got with our licensing system. I firmly believe there is a role for the supervising hours and the supervising drivers. But by the same token, I also think there's a greater level of responsibility on there to lift your own game and to see what else you can do. And it might be that you've got to make the call that as a supervisor, if you make the decision you're not a very good coach, then you might need to get some more help with that,
Mm.
either through, again, engaging with a driving school or just simply trying to educate yourself a little bit more. I think, and this is again one of our problems, I think we've dumbed down the driving process to a point
Yeah.
where it's virtually seen that everybody can do it. And the fact is, I still remember a quote I heard this was from Carl Benz, so from Mercedes Benz.
Yeah.
He did a quote where he said he felt the market for the motor car was limited because he felt there was only ever going to be a maximum of 1 million people around the world that could ever be trained well enough to operate it. Now, in Australia, I mean, we sell 1 million cars just in our little patch.
Yeah.
So, when you think the father of the motor car invented it, thought that there was going to be limits to who would be trained well enough to operate it as a chauffeur, it probably gives you an indication that we have some way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. But this is the next thing we're going to have to start coming to terms with is the advancement of the motor vehicle itself. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of complacency now in the automation of what the vehicle can do. I think that has got to come into our training as both instructors and people who are already upgrading their cars and going, "Oh, this button does this, it brakes for me. It lets me know when I'm going over the speed limit." I got to say I love that one because there seems to be a lot less speeding, deliberate speeding because I think people are getting the notifications, but yeah, I think there could be a danger of relying too much on the automation. Having said that, I cannot wait for automatic cars. There would be a lot less drama on the roads. Bring it on. But until then, I think what do you think? We've got to look at that?
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any doubt that our nation's road toll has come down largely because of the quality of the cars.
Mm.
And with that, it's a double-edged sword that they are so good. If you were doing 100 kilometres an hour in your 1975, Holden Kingswood, you probably ever felt every bit of that 100k an hour. Now they wisp along with just really effortless ease.
Yeah.
And I think the EV market, all that's going to be a whole other thing again, because I think there is a change to it becoming a little bit more like a computer
Yeah.
where people just go, well, that button's on, that one's off, and the car will just fix it.
Mm.
So I think the transition is going to be the hardest part.
Mm.
And I actually even saw a story the other day of two automated cars. I think it was in San Francisco somewhere, really started to create this traffic jam because they were both being so polite to each other. The other one didn't want to move. And so, again, nothing's ever a simple fix. You're going to have all sorts of or teething problems and things. But I think that the cars are so good now that there's a perception people think, well, the car will just fix it. And, a bit like a pilot, no matter how good the plane is, there's always going to be, as long as there's humans in control of it, there's a need for better human factors and better education.
I don't understand why we don't have a higher level of driver education here in Australia, especially when we've got so many rules that we are required to obey. And we've also got the big distances, we've got the high speeds. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, we're not a European country, but we do have big distances that a lot of people travel on and at a higher speed. So, of course, things can get pretty ugly pretty quick at those levels. So, and I'm sure you're the same. I'm always like, well, more training is good. Why can't we get more training at the lower levels like where I'm at? Because I know many instructors who they're just teaching to pass the test. They're not teaching to drive safely for life. And I think we need to up the game across the board.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think my view is we need to look at what are we doing before someone gets to a license. I think we compartmentalize so much in one little fraction of time for each person.
Yeah.
So they're finishing school, or, thinking about their next career thing, and then we're going to give them a license. Then we're going to compress all that. Pains me to say this, but I'm often amazed how little credibility driving is given in, say, the schooling system.
Yeah.
That it's just seen as, I mean, I've done talks on road safety for year 12s, and the person at the school will say, oh, well, we can fit you in for half an hour between the talk on schoolie safety and the talk on, whatever the next thing is.
Yeah.
And it's the most risky thing. And this is where I keep coming back to this. It's the most risky thing that you're going to do on a daily basis. And I can't think of anything else that if it had that title as a culture and a society, we would be so flippant about it, not just in Australia, but it's kind of everywhere. Everybody seems to go, oh, well, driving, it's just driving. You just, and we've got to change that attitude. I mean, I love driving, and that's again a weird thing in a driver road safety space. Most people in that area tend to be completely anti-cars, and I'm the opposite. I love them,
Yeah.
and I love driving, and I seek as much enjoyment out of that as I possibly do from playing music or other things. It's something I really love,
Yep.
and because I love it, I want to get better at it. And I think we don't often do that. And it's interesting, Liz, when you mention overseas and things like a recent trip to Italy and to that part of Europe, things like lane discipline are so different over there. We're not like Brown's cows like we are here on the M1 or wherever. There's a lot better lane discipline there. And, there is a traffic jam. Everybody pulls off to the side to allow emergency people to get up the middle of it. So I think there's things that go beyond just road rules. There's things that go beyond enforcement. And I think there's also, and again, this is a challenging space, but I think quite often road safety is the melting pot for a whole stack of other issues. How people view authority, how we view personal responsibility, youth crime ends up in the road safety patch. So there's all these things which we're not going to solve with better road rules or safer cars or better roads. We're only going to try and tackle it having better relationships with human factors and understanding the social connection that being on the road actually provides as well.
Well said. That's the thing. I don't think we do put enough gravitas on A, learning to drive correctly, and B, once we're out there, doing the job of driving correctly. I think as you say, we're flippant. We're blasé about it. We just don't, oh yeah, I'll just go down the shops and, if I'm not really paying attention, it doesn't matter. It does. And I think as a society, we've got to understand it impacts everything. Start with money. All of our insurance bills, I mean, they're just going up and up and up. They're not staying still and they're not going down, are they? They're
No,
only
and
going up. And that's because the cars are more expensive. They're more expensive to repair. And when people constantly crash their car because of the lack of car control, let's say, again, it's just costing us as a society. It's not just the one person, oh, you have to pay your excess. Everybody's insurance will go up because of that. So I think I think we really do need to start putting some more emphasis on, look, this is an important job you do daily. You wouldn't, muck around in the kitchen with fire. So why would you do it when you're behind the wheel? It's crazy.
And it's one of the things one of our recent Fatality Free Friday campaigns, we were talking to one of the leading doctors in Brisbane, and he said, road trauma takes up the hospital bed, the operating room that might have been for a heart surgery, might have been for cancer. It's deploying resources from some of those other operations and health issues. And it's one of the things I've always struggled with. We just seem to think of road safety, well, that just sits with the transport minister.
Yeah.
But actually, it's the education minister's role as well. And actually, it's the health minister's role as well. It's also the premier and also the roads minister federally and the prime minister. And yet we just seem to go, oh no, it's just transport. I think, and that's again, if we really thought about the full cost of it, not just in human terms, but in those economic terms, I mean, it's still a figure I heard decades ago, so I'm convinced this is completely outdated now, but it was $30 billion a year 20 years ago. So just the financial cost of that, especially at a time when, let's face it, the economy and other costs are a thing, costs of living is a thing. Maybe there's some better ways to, in fact, I thought it was interesting, it's amazing. All of a sudden there's a petrol shortage or a perceived petrol shortage, and suddenly we're talking about, well, what can you do to save petrol? I thought if we only did that same thinking to the saving the lives of the 1,314 people we lost last year,
Yeah.
we'd have a different outcome.
Exactly right. I mean, we're all, I find that especially when you're scrolling Facebook and all the questions about driving or comments about driving on posts on Facebook, you've got so many experts out there, but I'm like, well, half of them are saying one thing and half of them are saying the other. So all of these people who've been driving all these years, well, maybe you're not correct. Maybe you should get some, some good information to find out what is the truth, not just what does Facebook tell me.
And it's like with so many things, you're right. It's like so many things with driving technique. And I know there's a million ways you can probably, like a golf swing. The stuff I've looked at, I've got some research to back up from a human factors point of view. And I often hear a lot of people talking about driving technique and that probably, to be honest, probably the best of intentions.
Yeah.
But I just sit there and go, this is complete misinformation. It's just been handed down from person to person, or it's an assumption, a motorsport assumption that doesn't have a relevance in the real world. And I think we've got to look at our scorecard. When we've had year-on-year increases in road fatalities since 2020, and that's even factored in for the per 100,000 population. It's the number one thing that's going to kill a child. It's the biggest risk in a workplace. And if we look at our scorecard, we're not doing very well. So and Liz, that's my concern, is what is the figure before we see change? Is it 4,000 people a year? Is it 5,000 people a year? Is it like the fuel sovereignty issue? Do we just bob along until one day something absolutely catastrophic happens and then it's panic stations, to try and fix it? So, yeah, I'd rather be doing smaller things now to try and prevent a bigger problem down the track.
Big time. And that's the way I teach. I will train people into the correct procedure rather than correct mistakes. It's so much easier and it's much
Yeah.
less traumatic and dramatic, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, I can still remember hearing about that bus that lost control on the roundabout on the way back from a wedding, and they lost, 26 people or something on the bus. All I can think was, what caused that? Why wasn't the driver doing his job better? I always go back and go, how could we have prevented that? And
Yeah.
99% of the time, it's driver distraction or lack of car control. So if we're not teaching that at the base level, then by the time they're licensed and, God forbid, getting bus licenses and truck licenses, it's not getting any better.
And I often compare that because the levels of responsibility of what I'm about to say to you are exactly the same. If that happened at 35,000 feet in an aircraft, there would be outrage about that. You certainly wouldn't hear your pilot, and again, I'm only going from what I've heard here, but you certainly wouldn't hear your pilot going, ladies and gentlemen, let me show you something. Let's see what this thing can do. There's a level of responsibility. And if you think about it, the bus driver has exactly the same level. The only thing that's changed is the proximity of the ground.
Yeah.
So, if we view pilots a certain way, why don't we view bus drivers the same way? Why don't we put that same, because that responsibility actually is the same.
Yeah. Exactly right. And what do you think, Russell, about getting more, not only training, but assessment with the higher levels of the licensing? So car license is your base, then you make your way up through the trucks, or you can go straight to a bus. But once you've had your license, again, that's it. Why are we not reassessing these people every 5 years or so To see if they're still competent, to see if they're still physically able to do the job.
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, if we look at aviation, you have to be certified for an aircraft. You have to go through regular tests with that. You have to go through recertification. You have to go through simulator training. We don't do any of that with anything from a trailer all the way up. Once you've got your license, that's it, away you go. And we reap what we sow. I think when we're not investing in education, when we're not investing in more training and more regular touch points, I think it's one of the things I've often said. I think work-related road safety has a real key for us, because all the workplace legislation applies as it would in an office or in a factory or on a warehouse. Those same rules apply for driving for work purposes. So I've got a view that if we can make anybody that's driving for work purposes better, they will eventually be teaching the next generation of driver better. If we can bring the kids along at an earlier age and just drip feed up road safety information through their schooling system, rather than again trying to compress it into everything in one little 12-month or 18-month period. And then also dare I say it, how could we incentivize people for good behavior instead of just the stick all the time? Because that doesn't work in any other form of human evolution or human development. It's got to be the carrot and the stick. And we don't really have an approach of rewarding people for what good looks like. And I think that's part of our problem. Everyone says I'm a great driver, but compared to what? Compared to what? So if we had a way of rewarding good behavior, then also, again, potentially, if there might be another license level, if you invest in yourself and do a little bit more, well, then maybe there should become some rewards for that. And I've often thought, could you get governments to talk to the car parking firm or the petrol companies or the tolls? Or could you say, look, if you're a gold license holder and your license is clean, there's a saving to you of $1,500 a year just through less license fees, less tolls, less fuel, less on the parking. And then suddenly people go, actually, a bit like your frequent flyer card, that has a bit of value to it. So you then look at it differently rather than just this rudimentary, oh, like that just happens all the time. I mean, even the fact when you go to renew a license now, I mean, you can do most of that online. No one's testing your vision. No one's making a call on that. And again, sadly, I think we reap what we sow. Equally, I think too, we've got more cameras than we've ever seen on our roads. Yet I'm seeing probably more bad behaviour because the physical police presence isn't there. And that's a whole
Absolutely. No, you're dead right, Russell, because I mean, that does make people behave. If they can see a police officer nearby, then they're going to, oh, I'm going to do the speed limit. Oh, I'm going to indicate correctly. I want people to drive as if there is a police officer near them at all times. And it would actually work better for the community, because then we'd all be doing the right thing, not just half of us doing the right thing. Again,
Yeah.
it's a big, huge, we could do so much better, couldn't we?
Oh, absolutely. And as I said, I think we're also dealing with issues that, go beyond our scope. I think I saw this story last night of the whole squad of e-bike riders running right through Brisbane and virtually taunting police. Or you don't want to sound like that old person in the room, but back in my day,
Yeah.
if a policeman spoke to you, you'd be like,
Yeah.
and for God's sakes, please don't tell mum and dad. Now it's, I think, the polar opposite. And I think that's also part of our problem, that there's just society things like that, which are, again, the answers to those lie in what's being taught in school, or what's our view on authority, what's our view on culture, what's our view on other people. Again, I'm not sure about you and your listeners or viewers, but, I'm seeing more people making last minute decisions, crossing multiple lanes, no indication, to only just make an exit. And instead of going, I've missed the exit, take my medicine, go to the next one, come back. Oh, no, I'm just, because I have to go there without any thought of consequence. And you could say the same for red lights, stop signs, roundabouts, you name it. In fact, my wife was even telling me she was overtaken on the wrong side of the road by an L-plater under supervision
Wow.
as she was turning into our driveway. This person, instead of waiting, has just decided, I'm going to go overtake on the wrong side of the road. And, had she not been switched on enough, she just turned in, well, that would have been a crash. But that supervisor drivers let that happen. So I still remember, very blessed. I had probably the best driving coach anyone could ever ask for, a chap by the name of Frank Gardner. And Frank would always say to us as instructors, if a student dips a tire off the road by that much, it's the instructor that's failed, not the student. And that's a mantra that I think as supervisors, we all should take a bit of a lesson out of that one.
So, Russell, what do you think us as drivers could do to be safer on the roads, to be safer for the people around us, and to generally just have a better time when we're driving?
Well, I think we probably touched on a little bit before, Liz. Being present is one thing.
Mhm.
A little bit of journey management. So maybe just leaving maybe that extra 5 minutes before you think you need to. We're certainly seeing more traffic on the road these days. So that little bit of extra time is probably going to be invaluable to you. I think other things, certainly looking further ahead down the road, if there's one thing I say to people almost ad nauseum, is look further ahead. Try and get your eyes looking further ahead down the road. The challenge with that is for most people is they have too tight a grip on the wheel, and just having a tense grip is enough to bring in your field of vision. So try and think of controlled relaxation, having the hands a little bit looser and virtually nothing. Try and have as little tension from the waist up as you can. That'll help open up your field of vision and help you look further ahead down the road. And then I think the final thing I always said is it's drive to conditions, whether that's environmental, like weather or whatever, or whether it's just the general traffic around you, driving those conditions and being present and being aware of those things. The hard part is, as human beings, I mean, we're not robots, so we can't concentrate 100% of the time because you will phase in and out of that. But if you're reading the road further up ahead and you're ready to just roll off the throttle a little bit, or maybe give a little bit more gap, they're the little things that a passenger won't even know you've done it, but you risk manage what's coming up, potentially coming up ahead.
100%. I'm not going to lie when I say to my students on a daily basis, and usually at least 10 times a lesson, light grip, look ahead. It's
Yeah.
it's a little mantra I try and get them to do because and you're dead right. I'm looking rear vision mirrors when I'm stopped at lights and I see a very experienced driver behind me, read old, my age, um, and they're behind me and I can see them gripping the wheel. I'm like, what, why? Just
Yeah.
relax. A, don't
Yeah.
have your hands up that high anymore anyway. It's very old fashioned. Let's get them down to where they're more relaxed. But you're absolutely correct. The further ahead a driver looks, the happier they're going to be because they can then react in plenty of time to any dramas. And I think
Mm.
especially for learner drivers, especially 100% for learner drivers, their field of vision is quite narrow because they're so worried about, I don't want to hit this, I don't want to hit that. But as I
Yeah.
say to them, it's actually the dead opposite. You need to look
That's
ahead so that you can see the threats and assess them and go, that's a big threat, that's not a threat. And to worry about the things that are close by, your peripheral vision will pick up on that. You're going to see it. So don't worry so much about what's close, worry what's coming.
And I think you're right. The research tells us that a new driver has a scanning pattern where they basically look down and look up in fairly quick range. So they're checking speed, lane position. That's pretty much what happens. And sadly, as a post-licensed trainer, at the other end, I've trained people towards the end of their career where they still had that same scanning pattern.
Yeah.
And then they wonder why they've had a whole series of near miss moments and little frights all the time because they're just not looking further ahead. So I think, we talked about this transition a little bit before, and I completely understand why a learner driver in the initial stage would have such a short visual scanning pattern. But we have to try and make people aware of that and get them to lift their eyes up and look further ahead. But they won't do it if they're all white knuckles on the wheel. You've got to be able to relax all that. And that's where the human factors and all that come into play. And quite often, again, when I say that to someone I'm coaching, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, my golf pro tells me exactly the same thing." The first thing a golf pro will look at is your club handle, and if it's all worn away, they know straight away that you're holding the club too tight, which means your shoulders are too tight. So it's exactly the same. The number of people that say, "Yeah, it's just like horse riding. Yeah, it's just like snow skiing. Yeah, it's just like golf," and it is. It's the same. It's the same principle. The hard part, probably not so much. Horse riding is probably a little similar, but we've got all this going on as well. The cars, pitching and yawing and throwing you around inside the cabin. And if you're not posturally stable, the very next thing is, well, how do I stabilize myself? As humans, our instinct is to do that, was grab onto something. Yeah. And the moment we've done that, the field of vision starts to come in. So there's things like that. But the scanning and the vision, again, I get asked in media all the time, what's one thing people can do? And the reality is there's 10 million things people can do, but the best thing is if you can just lift your eyes up and look further down the road, it'll solve a lot of your problems.
100% every single time. As soon as the students get the vision up, I can see it in their faces. They're almost smiling. And I say to them,
Yeah,
look, your brain's doing a happy dance because it knows what's going on. It's no longer scared. So you're,
correct.
yeah,
You've suddenly
scanning.
taken the mystery out of what's coming up.
Exactly.
And the other thing I would say too, another great trick, and I'm sure driver trainers would already be deploying this, but just think about, imagine you've got a bowl of water in the back seat of the car, and the bowl's almost full. So you just want to make sure that not necessarily driving slower, but you're driving smoother. You're smoother with your steering input. You're smoother with throttle and brake. And if you start that with the vision, suddenly you get into a little bit more flow, and you're able to read the road up ahead a little bit better as well.
100%. I just had a lovely girl this morning who I had for the first time. She's done about 6 hours with dad, who, would you believe, used to be an instructor 20 years ago back in the UK. So, of
Mhm.
course, dad said, don't cross your hands. And I've enlightened her. Of course, you can cross your hands. Australia, we've never been able to not cross your hands. It's always been quite legal here. And you only do it in the quiet back streets, guys. So don't send me letters. You don't do it at roundabouts. You don't do it at traffic lights. It's quiet back streets and for your maneuvers, of course. And dad, I don't know, he must have been so focused on the steering that he'd forgotten about the vision. And so just before, we got too much into the lesson, I'm like, okay, let's talk about vision. I explained the lesson. And now she's like, oh, it's so much smoother. Like, yeah, it is. And you're happier and it's smoother and your passengers are happier. But yeah, you're right, Russell. I absolutely teach chauffeur driving because I'm in the car with these students all day. I don't want, I got a bad enough neck. I don't need any more big jerks. And especially for the fully licensed experienced drivers out there. I've sat in cars with some of my friends and they're a bit rough. I don't say
Yeah.
anything, but I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'll drive next time." Um, but, why
But if
can't we
you're
work a bit on that?
Yeah, and I think that's part of the next level training that I think needs to happen. We focus so much on a rudimentary basis. We expect people to perform at a university level on the road, but we've only ever given them preschool education. And so again, what do we expect with that? If we don't progress things along, we have to accept what we're ending up with. And I think that's part of the broader discussion of how do you get better practice behavior, in the system. That's the tricky part.
Yeah. Well, I think, of course, it's obvious that education is part of it, but as you say, it's mindfulness. It's being mindful behind the wheel because I can always tell I'm gonna get a heavy stop when the students, suddenly looking at somebody else doing something crazy. I'm like, "Yeah, they're not gonna give me a nice stop because now they're distracted." So whether it's, the chat, whether it's the radio, whether it's whatever it is, God forbid a phone, you're, again, not going to be able to drive as well, apart from your reaction time's gonna be god awful because you're not paying attention.
Yeah, and I think, there's other things with that as well. Like I just find there's an ignorance that people don't understand, some of the basic dynamics of things. Again, in a post-licensed course, I'll talk to people about, have you had an incident? And they'll nearly always be, oh yeah, I was coming down this hill, there was a left-hand turn and I was going a little bit fast and it was wet, and next thing the cars stepped out. So when you drill it down, you go, well, so you're probably on the brakes too hard as you've got to the corner. You've left everything too late, on the brakes too hard. The nose is heavy, the back is light. Then you've introduced the steering input. That's what started to bring and you start explaining it to people. And they go, oh, actually, maybe that's probably right. Because up to that point, it had been a mystery. The car had just left the road. They had no idea why. And that's when it gets to, oh, well, the road was wet, or, oh, well, the road wasn't very good, or something was wrong with the car. We very rarely shine the light back on ourselves and say, well, did I have a role in that? Because I'll guarantee you the answer is yes.
Oh, yeah, I think, I'm speaking to, Dr. Amanda about that, and she said that 95% of crashes, let's not call them accidents, they're not crashes, are due to driver. It's not due to
Yeah,
road. It's, yeah, there's only a small percentage that are due to car or road. That study, I think, was done in Canada. But yeah, we just
I
don't
reckon it's
take
even, I
over.
reckon it's even higher than that. I reckon it's closer to like 98%
There
if
you
it
go.
comes down to the user. I think that's the bottom line, and then there we go. If 95% of the incidents have been caused by the people factor, that's the area we're investing the least in, and we
Exactly.
need to change that.
100%. We do totally need to fix that. And I guess that's a chat for another day because that's when we start annoying governments.
Which is what's going to take. Yeah, we're
It
going to have
will.
to.
You're right. Yeah.
There's going to have to be more discussion about it, and I think more forceful discussion. I think for so long, again, we've just put road safety, and I'm saying we as a society, we've just put it in as either collateral damage or it's all too hard, or we don't really know what to do. We'll just make the roads better. We've had a far too simplistic approach at it for way too long, and yeah, I think we've got to start valuing the license a bit more, and I think we've got to invest more in what are we doing to make people better.
Absolutely. I think the test could be a bit harder. I know a lot of people out there saying, oh, no, it's already too hard. Well, it's not. My students get 100% first go. Why? Because I've trained them well. But it's, the people who don't pass, it's because they're not obeying the road rules or they don't have car
Mm,
control. The two basic things of being on the road, control your car and obey the road rules. So
yeah.
again, it's the onus is on them. If they're choosing to not gain good car control, if they're choosing to not obey the road rules, well, of course you're not going to pass. But I still believe that we need stronger licensing tests. It's not that hard, truly, if you know what you're doing. It's the pressure gets it. And as I say to my students, half the test is mental.
Yeah.
If you're a competent driver and you obey the road rules, you'll pass easily. But I think
And see, that's one of the things we never train, or we very rarely train enough of, is the inner game of driving. The licensing systems focus so much on the mechanics of it,
yeah,
and we're not really looking at what's going on inside.
yeah, absolutely. And then you've also got the prospect of once this learner driver has now passed, they're at the highest crash risk in their entire driving career. And what support do they have? They've
Yeah.
got mum and dad saying, be good, don't speed. Well, okay. Is speeding the only thing I need to worry about? See what I mean? It's we just don't give them the information before they're licensed and out on their own. I think that's the
And I
big
think it is one of the problems we've got with some of the media comps. We spend so much on that view of, well, just stick to the speed limit, and yes, that's part of it, but that's not the only thing. You can still have a massive crash through no fault of your own sometimes in a 60k zone, but it's ended up with a fatal outcome. And I think we've got to have a dialogue around legal doesn't automatically translate to safe. It's never one person's fault. There's always multiple things in play. And then I think we've got to then also shine that light on, well, what can we do to learn from that? And how do we improve that human interface? Like we said at the start, there's bigger society issues that we're going to have to try and tackle as well. And in that framework, the only thing you've got control over is yourself and your own behavior and your own. You'll never change anything in that person sitting next to you in that lane next to you, but you will change just through your own outcome, what might be happening to you on the road.
absolutely. I think we've all just got to be more mindful. Think I'm here to do the job of driving safely. I'm not just here to get from point A to point B as quick as possible. Seriously, guys, what's the rush? Have you really got to get home to doom scroll that quick? It's let's focus on let's all be happy, safe, confident drivers behind the wheel. But the only way we can do that is to think about what we're doing, be mindful, focus on the job of driving. Let's finish up by saying Fatality Free Friday. What's the message for Fatality Free Friday and Safety Week?
Well, again, pretty much sums up everything we've just spoken about. It's about trying to bring everybody on the journey and realize the part we all play as road users in that equation, that it doesn't rest with government or police or car builders or road builders. Road safety is our responsibility as a community. And really, this week, and then obviously as we count down to Fatality Free Friday at the end of the month, it's about recognizing that no matter how we're using the road, we've all got a critical role to play, and we're all a piece of that road safety puzzle.
Yeah. And let's all get home safely.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
100%.
Well, thank you so much again, Russell, for taking the time to be with us. We really do appreciate it. You're so full of knowledge that I could chat for hours and hours, and I'd love to, but I know you're a busy man. So can I ask, can you come back again, please?
Look, I'd love to, Liz. Happy to be part of the show anytime. So you're right, we've got a lot to chat about, so more than happy to do that.
Wonderful. We might get stuck into the governments next time. That'll get a bit of notice. All right, my friend. Thank you so much for your time. As always, we appreciate it and we look forward to seeing you next time.
My pleasure, Liz. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you. All right, guys, stay safe, be kind, and we'll see you next time. And my full driving lessons are available on Apple Podcasts and the artofconfidentdriving.com website, where you will get access to instructional videos. Remember to relax and enjoy the drive. See you next time.